I'm Adele Lim.
Are you the ADELE LIM that's on the poster right behind your own head?
I know. It's like I've got this crazy rich poster behind my head. It's so freaking narcissistic. But
It's fucking awesome.
it was all put up, before we all lived on Zooms.
You're just like, oops, I had a little something to do with one of the most
Oh,
successful
yeah, this
romantic
little
comedy films of
thing.
all time. What else have you worked on?
So after Crazy Rich, I was on Disney Animated Features Raya and the Last Dragon, and it
Mhm.
was slated to be released November this year, but because of pandemic everything, it's now, I think, slated for release March of next year.
Everything's being moved around. It's pretty crazy.
It's nuts. The landscape's moving under our feet. I'm sure you're dealing with it as well, but like nothing can get insured for a lot of shows that are being written now. We don't know the world we're writing for right now. Like, I found
Yeah.
myself writing a scene of like people go into a bar or a restaurant. Like, we don't freaking know what a bar or restaurant's going to look like or feel like or how people are going to operate.
I wrote the season premiere of season 3 of You, and I was like, what am I going to say? And I just sort of improvised it, mostly for my own benefit. I improvised a joke about how the pandemic had come and gone and how these very privileged people in the scene had dealt with it. But I
Yeah.
was like, okay, if this is wildly inappropriate by the time we shoot, I'll have plenty of time to punch it up. I just need to be able to say something so my brain can wrap around this project,
100%.
So you and we actually met in a staffing meeting a million years ago. Do you
Yes.
remember? When you have a pilot that you've made and it's in contention, you start to meet people to put a staff together. And I'm pretty sure I met with you. You had written this incredible script about gambling. Um, that was so fantastic, but I just felt like I was just immersed in this world.
You're kind. That was like a very early, like, quick spec I had to churn out. I think it was called The Single Girl's Guide to Poker. And what happened was, you know how it is, like you're on staff, you're busting your ass, and then staffing season rolls around and your agent says, you need a sample. And, I'm like, I can crank out a sample in like 2 to 3 weeks. And I thought, shit, maybe I can. Because my boyfriend at the time was a full-time poker player. And so if you've ever been in a relationship with a professional gambler, like your life is pretty much listening to bad beat stories every fucking day. And so when you're writing a pilot, you need to sort of immerse yourself in the world. You need to really know it, forwards and backwards. And given the short period of time I had to write a pilot, I thought, you know what? Against my will, I've been made completely familiar with this world. So like, I'll write about that.
I think that's a pretty hot tip, actually, because in general, the idea of like, you have to write specs, you have to write samples to break in or to get jobs. That's an incredibly intimidating thing. When you like look out you're like, what should I do? What kind of things should I write? And I was in a marginally similar situation where I was splitting up with my writing partner, and she and I both needed to come up with specs so we could go out on our own. And I had about a month.
Oh,
And like, I always think anything that stops you from overthinking is probably good.
yeah.
It's like, if you have to just do it really quick, it's like, I had a similar thing where I was like, well, I have this idea. It's not very original. It's about a coroner and like the dead people start to talk to him. And like, so no one's going to give me an award for most original idea, but I do know a lot about coroners because my dad was a pathologist. So I decided to just go with the thing I knew.
Yeah, because then you don't have to
Mm-hmm.
fake it. And I think, that you've read a lot of pilots in your time. And, it's funny. I can't really put my finger on it, but you can tell when something just reads authentic or feels authentic. Even
Mm-hmm.
if you don't know that world, there's a rhythm, to how people speak, it's what they talk about. There's a certain like tactile, rich quality to the writing that you really cannot fake unless like you've been in it. And by the way, like the whole writing of pilots thing, again, like, I think when we were both coming up, I don't know if you wrote TV specs like of existing shows,
I did.
and I did that. Like, the whole thing was like you have 2 or 3 specs of existing shows, and that was so much easier to do, to write within like a known playground with known characters. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think I can emphasize enough how hard it is to write an original freaking pilot with fully fleshed out characters. Nobody's seen these people. It's hard to like familiarize your reader and make them fall in love with them and come up with this whole new concept that nobody else has ever come up with. It's crazy making.
There's only so much we're going to be able to tell people about the process of staffing and getting into the
Mhm.
business because we're in the middle of a moment of such profound change. But you co-ran a show for the CW, right?
Yeah, Starcrossed. I did it with my pal Meredith Averill. Can't overemphasize how hard it is to be a showrunner. I don't know how anybody does it alone. It is a 2-person job at
It is.
minimum.
Mm-hmm.
And she and I had worked before. She'd never run a show. I'd never run a show, but the EPs on it were also showrunners and who worked with both of us. And they knew, at least with the both of us, we were just like such eager beavers that we were going to bust our asses for for this little
Mm-hmm.
CW show with a 7-day shooting schedule and like a nothing budget. And we loved it. It was all about aliens who were put in this like contained area, and it was supposed to be this allegory for race and, otherness. But it being a CW show, we just had really hot aliens.
They were so hot.
Oh my God.
Frequently no shirts.
Okay,
So thank you.
You are welcome, because I feel like I need to personally take credit for a lot of that. Female gaze. And it's funny, sometimes, on writing panels or whatever, people ask about, exposition, how do you deal with it? And, we all know like exposition is total death. The concept of it just took some explaining. We're in the future, but not too far in the future. We thought we would just unpack it as we went, but the network felt very strongly that we needed to explain all of that. And I remember wrestling with this scene thinking like, how the F am I going to just like talk about this made up alien race and not just have it sit there?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, I'm the audience for this. Like, what do I want to see? I was like, I want to see these two hot alien dudes with tattoos, like shirtless, like completely like ripping into each other. So I made up this whole training sequence where like this like senior hot, aliens like training the younger Turk, and it's like they're the warrior tribe. So they're fucking like tearing at each other. And as they're doing it, like one of them under the guise of training is like kind of questioning him about like the tribe's background and, the different sects and like, all these little details. Again, it might be the biggest cheat in the world, but like I was entertained.
I love that. I'm going to steal that. It's like, if you want people to pay attention to an info dump, make it visceral and hot, have people punching each other in the face or fucking.
Yeah.
I'm going to do all, you know what? It's all fucking exposition from now on for me. I love that. We're being marginally facetious about it. I'm actually being kind of serious. I think that's a really fun writing challenge, but I think that that's such an important thing, because many of the people who come on my Instagram, ask questions, are people who are essentially at home. They have day jobs that are not writing yet. They're kind of self-starting and their circle is small, or it's a circle of one. I mean, part of the point of this is it's like you're in a circle of one plus Sarah and ADELE and all of these other people who just want to help. But exposition, like clearly telling me what your world is and doing it quickly. Like, this is what I want to ask you about when you're reading other people's scripts for staffing and stuff like that. When I'm reading that, I kind of want people to be able to settle me into that world somewhere in the first 5 pages so that I know what I'm supposed to be looking for in the story, as opposed to trying to discern what the world is. I want to go on the emotional journey. That's really, really hard, not to make it dry.
Speaking to your experience of reading it and wanting to be settled, I just don't want to be confused. Take me on a journey. Like you're telling me a story as a friend. I don't want to keep stopping myself in the middle of your page going like, hold on, where am I? Where in the States? Is it rural? Is it urban? A lot of writers have this thing about like unpacking the mystery, which is great, but then you need to build that. It can't be like an accidental thing.
As we're recording this, a trailer came out today for Misha Green's new show, Lovecraft Country. When you watch teaser trailers, they have a big clue, I think, to that, because generally speaking, somewhere in the first 2 seconds, they're going to evoke the feeling of the place that you're in. They're trying to get it out of the way so they can tell you what the show is about.
Yeah, 100%.
I don't know if you have plans to do much more stuff in TV. Are you still straddling both worlds, the feature world and the TV world?
I am. I think, the pandemic's a weird time because, and I've just gotten out of my Disney deal and trying to figure out what my next thing is. But TV is my happy place. Like I grew up in TV, like a lot of TV writers, might have grown up wanting to be feature writers. And then, at least for our generation, they sort of lapse into TV. For the people who aren't familiar with it, the way our industry operates is in TV. Writers are the boss. We run the everything and oversee all of it and have so much control. Even if you're like this punk staff writer, depending on your show, once you're on set, like you speak to the executive producers, like, that 100-something person crew is looking at you going like, what color is her dress? Is this right? What time of day is it? And for features, really, it's director and a producer's medium. And we don't have that same sort of agency there. I think, I will never get used to the idea of not having the same kind of agency that we do in television. And I feel like I would love to get back to that.
So if I want to staff on your next show and I want my script to stand out in the pile, can you talk a little bit about what your process is when you have a pile of scripts in front of you? I'll just preface it
Yeah.
by saying when a showrunner is staffing a show, we get sent scripts from all over the place. Like there's the stack that has been approved by the studio, and then every agent you have ever met in your life sends you just a couple that they really need you to read, and your friends will have scripts that they want you to read. So the stack, even if you try to keep it lean and mean, is going to be 20 or 30 scripts high just when you're starting, right?
Oh, 100%, like 20, 30 scripts per like
Per
position
slot.
on your, yeah, per slot. It's crazy. That whole rule of like, grabbing people within the first 10 pages, 100% true. It's not just about like grabbing someone's interest in it. Like it tells me like, what you're doing as a writer, that as a, that you're not going to waste my time by like, slowly unpacking something and telling me why you're worth it as a writer on page 35. Nobody has that time. But I think for the lower levels, I think for me, it was just finding something that excited me. There are things to me that are easy to teach and things that are hard or like you can't teach. Things that you can teach are structure. Ideally, I'd love to read a script that has everything and a new voice and, great structure. But starting out, I think we all understand how hard it is for a super newbie writer to just nail all of it. But if that person has this amazing voice and an amazing point of view and really writes or tells me something I did not know, or, lets me hear a character I haven't heard before, that is really exciting.
I will almost always pick the ambitious failure, especially at lower level. Whoever that person is, whatever their background is, whatever their life experience is, just that they're able to connect their own spirit to being able to put it down on paper versus just handing me characters. That there's something personal that suffuses it. Upper level, you kind of have to know your shit.
Just to skew on the upper level thing for like a second, because, there's been a lot of talk in the industry about like, lower levels and minority and, diversity staff positions, et cetera. Are they kind of up to the level, just to have an open conversation about that. But, having been in as many shows, as rooms as I have, I've always been amazed at the level of, I've worked with tremendous, amazing writers on the upper level, but there are also a lot of upper level writers who don't know what they should know in terms of like structure, in terms of like, helping you like, lead a room or just being able to do a rewrite or, like basic things like that. It always like staggers me. I'm like, how did you get here? Yeah.
I think part of what you're saying is that people sort of like to blame it on something about how people are hired. Versus there is, first of all, like not everybody's that great. You don't know. Lower level writers, they just need to be really hungry, happy to be there, have a lot of raw talent on the page. And when I meet with someone who's really green, I just want a sense that they'll stay up all fucking night. Like that they won't be precious about it, that I don't have to hear about it if they haven't, slept all week, that they are willing to sort of bleed a little for it.
Oh my God.
I can teach the rest.
But that thing of being nurturing and wanting to show a younger writer the ropes, I feel like people can't take that for granted. I wish more writers did that truly. I feel like I've been on a lot of staffs where the showrunner or the higher ups basically will say something like, well, I'm not running script school. I don't have time in my day to, tell this staff writer how to do things. And having been a staff writer and knowing a lot of staff writers, sometimes people have this idea that, you have to show up on staff fully formed. And there is no way, if you've never written for television before, that you show up as staff writer and you're going to kill it, right. Like maybe there are those like rare unicorn creatures. I personally I don't know any. The learning curve is just huge. And so I've been fortunate to work with a bunch of writers who are just like, okay, well, this is how we do this thing. Well, we don't do this because of X.
I bet you there's a bunch of people watching this who have been on a couple of staffs and they're like, but the staffs I've been on are shitty and are not giving me learning opportunities. And, I was on a staff for a while that just didn't have the budgetary flexibility to send writers to set to cover their episodes, which were in another country. That was a huge hole in my education for a couple of years. And did you go to film school?
Sort of. I went to Emerson and my degree was literally like a Bachelor of Science in Communication with a concentration in video. There was no like film class that, so it wasn't,
right.
So I'm pretty sure it's not like film school specific. It's weird.
Okay. So then this is a very valid question for you, I think, because like, I think one of the most valuable skills that someone can have is just an instinct and an ability to keep educating themselves. And so I'm wondering how you think about, when you were doing Crazy Rich Asians, I don't know how many features you had written before then, but I assume you had written more TV scripts.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So how did you approach the deficits in the areas that you didn't know?
Crazy Rich Asians literally was my first feature script. I didn't have a feature spec. The only reason I ended up there is because John Chu and I had worked together. Just before that, we'd sold a TV pilot together. And so he knew me as a writer, and we liked working together. And the movie, which was based on the book, the second I started reading the book, I think it was a revelation to me because it's based on my home culture. I grew up in Malaysia. And so the Chinese of Malaysia and Singapore really, that's where the book is set. Growing up in such like a tiny, weird, like pocket, neighborhood of the galaxy, you don't think like anybody's ever going to write about that. And so now there's an opportunity to do it. So my God, I just have to. So I think where I had an advantage was I just knew the world beyond Inside Out. Like in terms of jumping in, I think in retrospect, I probably should have taken, there just really literally was no time. I was on staff on a television show while I was writing this feature. For better or worse, I think it's just like this overriding sense of just like, oh, fuck, I got this. Of course I have. Just to circle back a little bit, to being a staff writer. If I knew how much I didn't know, I would have probably been paralyzed. So I think perhaps it was good that I didn't know a lot of it, and that there's just this feeling of like, but I can do this, so I think the attitude probably should be like, there's a lot I don't know, but I can, I will, and I'll figure this out. So I think with features, I just jumped into it. I remember thinking, because in TV we have like 4 or 5, sometimes 6 act structure. I was just like, okay, for features, it's 3 acts, but generally we're still talking about like a 4 act structure with like a midpoint. And so it was just learning their vernacular. They have like a little bit more of a rigid formula, at least the people who've been working in like commercial features for a while, that you have to understand. Even if you want to break it, like you have to understand where they're coming from. So I think a big part of it was just like jumping in, being really confident, knowing the world really well, having a big vision for it. And again, everything else, I figured I could learn. Yeah.
It is this sort of mix of being really alert and willing, and like you're taking notes, so you're never going to ask the same question twice, but also kind of trying to locate the sources of friendly information.
Your job is like a combination of humility, of knowing when you need to learn, and 2, also standing up for yourself and, basically advocating for what you need to get your job done.
I'm starting to put together a little bit of a through line about in a lot of the stuff that you're saying. First of all, you're extremely resilient. Reading between the lines, like that you've been in a lot of different kinds of situations, and there wasn't a lot of, oh God, maybe I'll run away and quit going on, right? You were adjusting and adapting to a lot of situations. And then also one of the core voices inside you, in somewhere in your committee of voices, is one that's just like, girl, why not you, basically? Or like, I'm going to take this opportunity, or no, fuck if I'm going to lose this opportunity. That pushes you when you're moving into new territory. First of all, would you agree?
I think you've summed it up very well. I don't know if you've always felt that way, but the feeling of like, if there's something out there, an opportunity that, that should be me. Like I should be out there doing the damn thing. Yeah, we've all felt that in writing rooms where, sometimes you start out in a room and you're like, oh shit, I'm not the go-to person. Why aren't I the go-to person? Who can crack the showrunner's voice, and what do they know that I don't know? And so it's this whole thing of, if I'm not that person, like how do I become that person?
Yeah, exactly. And I don't mean it in any kind of an entitled way, or even I'm not even really meaning it in a competitive way, but more in a determined way. And in the face of like, it's like a pretty steep fucking learning curve to become a professional writer in the way that you have. I'm kind of curious to do a little bit of forensic investigation of where that came from, or have you always been that girl?
No, I don't think so. And I don't think I was that girl for anything outside of TV writing, like to be perfectly honest. Like, there's some things. I felt that way about dance. I think I grew up, like doing a lot of dance, and that just felt like it was part of me. And the way I feel like writing is part of me. Like you said, it's not necessarily an ambitious thing of like, how do I move up, in the writing hierarchy? It's more like, how do I be good at this? How do I vibrate at a higher level? But also, like, just speaking honestly about, being in this industry, I think a lot of the environments have changed a lot. But I think in addition to, wanting to be that go-to person or wanting to be a better writer, I think what fueled a lot of it was honestly like rage. Just to be honest, like, because sometimes it's so easy to get shut down sometimes or be dismissed. And I think, some people feel that more than others. I think a lot of women feel that, people of color feel that. And, we adapt and we react to it in different ways. Sometimes you get really quiet. Sometimes you learn to pass, or you learn to, sort of mimic the other voice and try to do it as well as they do. And I think a lot of times, like for me at least, it was like this burning rage to feel like, let me show you the writer I could be. Yeah. And by the way, I say that like there's this big brave voice in me, and like a lot of times I just fucking failed. Like I would, go for gold and be like, well, that didn't turn out. But
that doesn't usually get printed in the trades along with the announcement of your next whatever. And it's like, and then she also had 14 pitches that went mediocre to poorly, but that's true for all of us. Even the show that you and I met on when I was staffing it, I'm pretty sure it was the next woman I sat down with. I got a call in the middle of that staffing meeting. I walked out into the other room. It was the president of the network telling me the show wasn't going to get picked up. And so I walked back into that meeting and I sat down and I was like, so I don't really know how to end this meeting, but the show's not moving forward. So I think we're done talking. It's like,
oh my God.
Something that happens all the time.
Before Crazy Rich Asians, I came off like 3 pilots that I developed that I sold in the room, but didn't get picked up to series. The first time you get fired, and that's, I don't care who you are, it hits you, and it stays with you.
But I think like you, I never really entertained the possibility that I was going to stop.
No.
It's not like I had a great fallback, for one thing. Like, what was I going to, but I kind of expected it to be really hard. And I also kind of, to your point about rage, my rage might be a different flavor from yours, but I can really relate to that too. That feeling that like, there's nothing inherently fair about this situation. Not every person walks into a room and has to be the most undeniable person just to get a seat at the table. It's a puzzle I'm still kind of working on with myself about like, what is our next step? Where do we take it from here? It's a little bit of a shift in the conversation, but it's like, you're talking about being on all of these panels and you're speaking from a position of success and authority as somebody who, your face just made this little like, really? But yeah. But like, it wasn't fair for you.
Yeah, it's better now. But I think it wasn't fair for any of us. And, you talk about like having to be undeniable, the real talk about it. I mentioned it earlier that, sometimes as a female or minority, they view you as like, oh, well, maybe you're not as good a writer, but maybe you just have a seat here because you're a woman, or you're a minority. And I think, that was definitely that attitude when we were starting in. I was often the only female in the room, definitely the only minority in the room. And to be viewed like somehow there's like this shortcoming about you. Writers have to be given chances to fail. Like, it's a learning curve. You have to like try, you're not going to hit every single one out of the park. But I really do feel like the perception towards a lot of women and a lot of minority writers is like, if they don't get it, it is attributed to their otherness. Like, she doesn't get it because she's a woman. She's never going to get this voice of this like hard ass, like, SWAT agent. If she doesn't get it, because she's Black or she's Latino, she just it's the gap is too far, we can't teach it to her. Whereas I've seen like a white staff writer, male or female, even mostly male, be given like repeated opportunities even though their first few attempts didn't quite click, because that was just feeling, because they reminded the showrunner of like, that was me when I was like a young USC grad, having moved up from the East Coast, so that they're willing to give them, a few more opportunities, and they see someone they can mentor. Whereas when they look at it, somebody who's not like them, then it feels like they don't think that writer can grow or develop.
I think what you're talking about is so pervasive. And because it's unconscious in our culture, because we don't always know that we're biased. I mean, that's why it's called unconscious bias. Those of us in positions of power need to actively overcompensate. And when there is someone new on staff who is anything but that guy you described, we have to think about setting people up for success. And we need to question our assumptions about their work. Like Harvard did all those tests about bias, and they're like, everybody's biased. People from those minority groups are biased about that minority, So like the reality of women being softer. It's like, so I wrote on this show Supernatural for 7 seasons, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I was the showrunner for 2, and it's like both a show very much about boys' feelings and also this very macho show where they like kill people and behead them and are like the Marlboro Man, but a demon hunter. I would sometimes go online and read responses to episodes, and I would see people talking about, well, this script really, like, this writer really got that masculine voice and the action, and then this one, not so much, like the girl wrote it, and they wouldn't know that I had rewritten every word of the other script.
It goes back to that point of like, it was like those supernatural episodes were ascribed to your otherness. And I'm so gratified to hear you say that, I wish more showrunners had that attitude of just like, I can see how hard it was for you to get to this table, let me set you up for success. I also understand how hard it is just to run a show. Like there's not enough hours in a day. There's not enough money in your writer's budget. All you're looking for is for people to be able to help you tell your story. So it is difficult sometimes, trying to like make that extra effort to, help a younger writer come up.
The thing that you're saying is very, and like, I don't think I am without fault. I also know that I operate from like a very high level of privilege and white privilege. And, it's like, it's not as though I get to stand there like, just because I'm a chick or something. But I do think like, I think about this a lot right now during pandemic times. It's like, why are we doing any of this? Why are we writing? Why are we making television? And like, it's not okay for me anymore to be so stressed out by any season of production or any money crisis or any actor flying off the rails that it would preclude like a base level of, humanity and like having a professional team. And like, it's like those people who have a reputation for being like, but I'm so stressed and I can't hear it. And it's dog eat dog. So y'all just need to eat each other and then I'll be in the room later, freaking out. It's like, why are you doing that to yourself over and over? Why are you making TV? Are you making TV to keep perpetuating this like stress cycle? I didn't realize I had strong feelings about this till we started talking, but like now people are watching TV and it's really doing something for them because they can't leave their fucking houses.
It's amazing, like, with everything that was classified as an essential service, what we do is, and I remember that took me a minute. I was like, is this right? But it is. When you look at, like Netflix subscription numbers now, like people need it, they need, to somehow feel connected, to somehow like escape from what reality is. Sometimes we all, we all feel it. We need it.
Do you have like a little mission statement inside you? Do you have a sense of why you write? Something that you pull out when you're having a bad day or when you don't want to do it?
And I realize like not everybody has this, but I think I'm fortunate in that I don't think there was anything else I've ever wanted to do. The place I go back to, I've really tried to go back to because I've had a lot of those experiences, whether it's being on a show or being part of the project. And, like you get into this loop of like constant notes and it's never good enough. And, and you're really struggling. And when you can't land it, it's hard to write from a place of fear. It's hard to write from a place of like, I'm not getting this, but I'm forcing it. And I think what I've always come back to is that I have to write from a place of joy, and if I can't, I have to like take a step back and go find that place of joy before I can go back to writing. Because I have spent years like trying to force it to happen. That feeling of like, you just have to work harder. You just have to push harder. You just stay up, just have another Red Bull, steal someone's Adderall, like, whatever was kind of getting you through that thing. But at the end of it, reading those pages, it's not like I would be awful to myself and push myself hard and then magic would show up. Like that never, ever happened. It just to sound completely earnest and cheesy for a moment, but the art of writing, like okay, this is going to be so fucking overblown. I'm going to say it anyway, but it's like, it's godlike. Like you write it on a page, you create these people, you create this world, and then you hand it off, and then they're casting those people, and then they're building those sets. Like you're really making it all happen, and that should feel joyful. Like there's nothing like it.
Writing from joy might be the ultimate tip. By the way, it isn't as though you are zooming in to me from your, mansion in the clouds where people bring you things. Like you have children and a family. You have shit to do in your life. It's not like you have uninterrupted writing time. You're a mother.
Oh, write from joy, just feel it. But it's hard to write from joy sometimes when like you're on nonstop deadline. Like a lot of writers, I would be on staff, plus like I have my development deal, plus, another thing. A lot of us are just acclimated to operate with a certain level of stress vibrating within us the whole time. For me, the big lesson of this pandemic has been the whole thing of like really forcing myself to take a step back. And sometimes it means saying no to a lot of things, just to go back to that time when I was a new writer, where I had fewer obligations, where I could really kind of sit around and stare at the ceiling and like crack myself up, about like these people I wanted to like write about. It really is that, like finding a way to get back to your happy place. And that really does take work.
I expected you to say something like, I have this hobby or this place I like to go. But what you're saying is so much more fundamental, which is just you have to give yourself time. You can't expect yourself to be in the right mindset if you don't break it up and give yourself a second to stare at the ceiling.
Somebody before all this asked me, oh, what are your hobbies? And I looked at him like he was a crazy person. Like, what do you mean hobbies. Like, I'm lucky if I get to see my kids for 20 minutes. There's like,
Mhm.
I have all these great freaking hobbies I would love to do to get back into, but there's no time in the day.
Sometimes I give the characters in the scripts hobbies that I would like to have, so that I can research that. Like this character on The Magicians, Josh, is a cook. So anytime I was doing a script and he was going to cook something, I'd be like, so obviously I have to watch an hour and a half of BA Test Kitchen on YouTube, or I'm just not writing from an authentic place for Josh.
Yeah. I can't remember. I was talking to another writer about this recently, but it's something I stumbled across like out of pure necessity, which is like also allowing your subconscious elves to do a lot of the heavy lifting. This is related to like the TV schedule we talk about, which is grueling, but sometimes you have to sleep, and sometimes you can't force it. Like, you're staring at the page of just like, how do I break it, why am I not seeing that? Sometimes it's better to like park that message in your brain of just like, okay, this is the thing I need to solve. I'm going to park that with my elves, and then I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to take a nap, and sort of like trust that, the little elves will be tinkering away at it. And a lot of times like they come up with something without you.
I love that. I'm going to start calling it, I'm leaving it for the elves. Part of the reason we're putting this out there in the world for people to watch is that I really want that like teenage boy who's working so hard on his script alone and is judging himself for having the instinct that he should sleep on it so his brain can clear away some of the detritus and come back fresh. Like, now he's going to be able to say, well, ADELE calls it calling in the elves. And like, if she did it, it worked for her. Like, I'm not slacking. I'm giving the elves something to do, and they need work too.
This has been fun. Like, I love talking to other writers because it's, I feel like we're all part of such a specific cult. And also, I feel like there's so much out there in terms of how people are taught screenwriting. And, a lot of it is great, but it's just such a jarring, contrast to when you see like actual writers really trying to hash it out. And there are just like so many ways to approach it. So yeah, I would hate for a teenage boy at home to just be, who has that dream and has that yearning to feel like down on himself of like, I can't crack this. Why can't I crack this? If I was meant to be a writer, shouldn't this be easy? Like taking dictation from Jesus, like, it's not. It's hard.
I mean, but you'd be surprised. Like, I'm imagining 16-year-old me or 22-year-old me hearing that the woman who wrote a movie that I really love still struggles with that and gets stuck or has to leave it for the elves. I had this really dreamy idea of what it was to be a professional writer, where I thought, my God, you graduate and then like they give you money and then you're like a genius and you know how to do it. And then I got here and I was like, everyone is still figuring out how to do it from scratch every time they sit down. And the only exceptions are when you're kind of being a hack and you're like doing something you already know how to do because you already did it, right? Otherwise, it's a new problem every single fucking time.
And I think the other thing people don't really realize about professional writing, for TV, for film, is that how much rewriting and rewriting and rewriting that happens. And early on, you can take it as proof that you're not good enough. It's like, none of us are good enough. None of us are ever good enough. I literally don't know what it's like for something to just write itself. I've heard like some writers just have that thing where like, oh my God, I just felt this idea so strongly. I wrote my pilot in 2 weeks and there it was, fully formed, shoot it.
Right.
I've never had that experience in my entire life.
I find that so intensely comforting when you say that. Sometimes I make the other kind of joke where I'm like, if I just leave this out where the script elves write it for me, I'm like, I'll leave them cookies. They never come for me. Like, I've pissed them off in this lifetime and I have to do all the writing myself.
You're just like, no, I have to grind this out. And elves are gone.
Like, all right, it's fine. I'll grind it out.